The Question Behind the Question, Video Confessional by John G. Mueller. I think why the book was written was to not always put the blame on other people, and sometimes get more in detail and see if maybe it could have been something that you could have fixed, ultimately, and over time that you can use a basic setup that John had created. We're using I in the sentence of asking a question instead of why did they not do their job, maybe why did I not do my part, and using how and maybe an action to see if something in some way you could fix it. Ideas that changed or moved my viewpoint where one of the stories was the waiter getting the Coke for John earlier on in the book, and the whole purpose of how he asked the manager, the waiter asked his manager to go and get a Coke for him, and how the manager didn't ask any questions and just listened to him. And since they didn't have Coke at the store, the manager had to go out of the store and take some of the waiter's money to go purchase a Coke for John. And the other viewpoint that hit me was the cashier at the Home Depot that had purchased some small supplies for a customer that didn't have enough money for the supplies, and that later on the customer turned out to be a big part of influencing them and starting to purchase all of their supplies from the Home Depot, since the customer was a big part of some sort of business. Another idea that moved me was that the fact that you cannot change anybody, and that you have to let them figure it out by themselves, and being able to force someone to try to do something that you want that they do not want to do at the time is something that in cases is not right, but also if you let them figure it out over time, it can become more impactful to their life instead of you pushing it on them, or maybe letting them find it out by themselves instead of you pushing them to do it. Major ideas that were touched on in this book that I had bookmarked throughout reading the story was of course the whole template of beginning with what or how and containing an I to not force the blame on other people, and focusing on a sort of action instead of pushing the blame onto other people, and instead seeing what you could have done yourself and using that template in your daily life. And that's what I think the whole part of the book was written for, was to let people figure out that it's not always someone else's fault, but that also doesn't mean that you shouldn't always do someone else's job that they had laid out for them. Sometimes they just do not put enough effort in from the first place, but if you still do their job for them and think that it keeps being your fault for something that they didn't do, it could have possibly been the opposite, where they have not done their job and you just keep doing it for them and they take that for advantage. Another major idea explored in this book was the several stories, including the two that I had brought up before, but mostly the ones where it had touched on not blaming everybody all the time. And I know it gets brought up several times within this book about blaming each other, not blaming each other, and sometimes blaming yourself to an extent. But that's the whole point. I think that's the whole point of this book being written, was to not always blame others, and literally get a question behind the question and see if actually it could have been something that you could have changed and could change in the future. And in my honest opinion, I enjoyed this book. It wasn't exactly the first type of, it was the first type of this book, but not first type of businessy, I could say, type of book that I had read, but it didn't let me down in any way. The first couple pages that I read when I was looking for the books on the table from the start of this book talk section, I knew that I would like it, because it's one of those books that you can walk in and walk out at any point, or skip ahead or go back, and there are chapters in some way, but it's just to keep things separate and organized, but it honestly keeps everything set up well.